and welcome back to Continuing the Conversation. It's fantastic to be picking up our discussion on AI. In our last session, we really dove deep into some of the big landscape level shifts that we're seeing, especially around DeepSeek news and the broader AI revolution. But today, we want to shift gears into something much more hands-on and practical, focusing specifically on leadership. For leaders watching and trying to navigate the daily reality of the AI landscape, the critical question is, how do we move beyond just understanding what's happening in AI to actually leading effectively in this new environment? So today I'm joined with Rob, the CEO of CharmIQ. Thanks for being here, Rob, and welcome back.
Thanks for having me. It was enjoyable last time. We're going to do another amazing one.
Absolutely. So, in our last conversation, you touched upon something that really resonated with me and I know resonated with some of our viewers. This idea of leaders needing to develop a foundational, what you kind of came up with was a AI knife skills. Could you elaborate on that concept for us and explain why you see it as such a critical starting point for leaders? Everyone's just trying to get started or get their arms around all of that's happening in the AI world.
Absolutely. So the notion behind that was if you've ever cooked a soup or anything like that, you know that most of the work is done in the French, the mise en place, getting everything set up. And I've learned from many a chef that if you're chopping while you're doing the cooking part, you're kind of behind.
Mm.
So you want to get all your chopping done ahead of time. You want to have all your things ready for you so that you can just put them in at the right times. And the goal here is given the fact that you're going to end up doing so much chopping before you start. So the actual thing you're doing is cooking, but before you do that, you have to do all this other work, chopping, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where knife skills come in. The first thing you learn is when you're learning how to cook, you want to become a chef, is you learn how to use the tools that you have. And you just spend a lot of time chopping and chopping and chopping and chopping.
Right.
So what are those basic skills in AI that you need to have in your hands so that when you actually go and try to do the thing that it is that you're doing, what should you have at the ready?
Mhm.
And what's interesting is I learn a new one of these every day. This is evolving so quickly, and the models themselves are evolving so quickly that things that you learned yesterday may not be applicable to tomorrow. So how do you get even under that a little step further? Like, so how do you not constantly feel behind? What are the meta skills? And I think that those are the AI knife skills that we need to come up with. And what's interesting here is that it's an I'll admit personally, I had this incident happen yesterday. I try to not get overwhelmed by everything that's changing in the world. And yesterday, I had one of those freak out moments in the morning. I was reading a couple of blog posts from someone, and I had just seen some of the things that they were doing in their daily routine. And I got that overwhelming sensation of like, wow, I'm behind. Even though like maybe it was a week that I hadn't been practicing my knife skills, but I already felt
Mm.
behind on something that they had learned. So I think that the number one first skill that I think we all need to learn through this process is to not feel overwhelmed, to not feel that you're behind.
Mhm.
Because as I would always say to my mom, who's a chronic worrier, is that if worry is the thing that's going to solve the problem, then be the best worrier you can possibly be.
Right.
But if worrying isn't going to help solve the problem, then don't worry because you already have to solve the problem. To add another thing on top of it, which is worry, makes it even that much harder. So that's the advice that I would give first and foremost in terms of your AI knife skills here, which is you can't feel overwhelmed by all of this because it is overwhelming already. It is changing quickly. It is impossible to keep on top of it. And if you put this dread and maybe FOMO and whatnot on top of it as well, you're never going to it's like that first step, right? It's the hard one. So as an aging adult, I do now understand. I always recall, I always use my mom as the canonical example of somebody who's tech afraid. What's interesting is my father is tech bullish and he destroys everything, and my mother is tech afraid. and actually gets a better result. So I would almost say that the tech afraid it worked out in her benefit. But my father's always deleting stuff. He's like, whatever, we'll figure it out. It's like my mom's like, stop. Anyway, uh, as somebody who's getting older, it is getting overwhelming. It is like I'm like I always used to recall my mom would say like, why did they update my phone? Like it was fine before, now I have to find everything. And 20 years ago or whatever, I was like, whatever, you should be excited. It's new features. And now I exactly have that feeling. I'm like, we just all got the latest iOS for those of us who use it. And now my email is completely different. And I have to spend time and figure it out. And like, what's this new primary thing that's this big blue button now that I have to figure out? I'm like, I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with this. I just want to do what I'm normally doing. So again, we're all in that place, and this AI thing's coming and everything else. And again, take your deep breath,
Yeah.
lean in, let it go. We're all behind. It's all changing. There's a new thing every day. So you just have to pick up something and you have to start learning it. And I would say that that is your first life skill that you really need to do.
That makes sense. I think that makes sense and that resonates with me and I know it'll resonate with other leaders is sometimes we get overwhelmed with all the information out there and like how do we fine tune it? How do we not worry about it? Where's a trusted source that we can go to learn? So knowing that we can put the fear aside and just get started, what are some of the right strategic questions that leaders should be focusing on once they start developing this foundational understanding of like, okay, AI is here. We need to come up with a strategy. I need to work with my team. Like, what are some of those right strategic questions that leaders should be focusing on?
Another great question. I'm going to give my unconventional view of this, as I always tend to do, which is I think, just as my advice on this was, we have to kind of let go of the anxiety and so forth that we have going into it. I think we need to be okay and give the space that we can to our employees.
Yep.
Um, you know, back in the heydays of the .com, everyone talked about the 20% of time that Google and folks were giving, some fraction of their time they were allocating to their staff so that they could go work on other projects while they're doing it. And
Mhm.
it might be that we have to repurpose that kind of mentality for today, that we really need to focus on allowing our staff to become aware of all of the tools that are available, try one out that they haven't. I personally have to carve time out of every day to become aware of the tools that are out there. I have to use it in a way that I might have used it 2 months ago and it didn't work, but the models have since changed and I need to try it again and use it. So I think one of the most strategic things that we could do right now for our all of our staffs and ourselves is to afford ourselves a little bit of time. So, but I'll just say the first thing that's going to come into your mind is, well, if we're all behind, how can I take and carve some time out? And I think this is just one of these things that we kind of have to do no matter what.
As leaders and leaders listening, making the investment of giving the gift of something that's going to help your team and your staff be more productive and work smarter and faster and deeper is is the gift of AI, whether it's Charm or ChatGPT or a million of the other tools that are out there. It's understanding as leader and leadership that these tools are there and available, and there are safe places and platforms that they can use that don't train the models, don't share the data, and can be customized for every individual at the organization, whether you're in product marketing or sales or account executives, account managers. So we should, as leaders, be thinking like problem driven, not tech driven, right? And really looking at what AI has to offer and how it can help us.
Yes, and you brought up an interesting point in there that we probably should deep dive in another one of these
Mhm.
sessions, which is what are the tactics that you need to ask before you using another tool? You had mentioned, for example, whether or not they use their data or share their data or train on your data. There's a number of those, so we should bookmark that one for a future podcast. That's what's great about doing these as we do them is
Yeah.
that we come up with new ideas as we go.
Yeah. So On that note, like for leaders, asking questions, right? So, what specific business problems are we facing and what are we trying to solve for and can AI help? That's like a good question for all leaders to ask themselves and ask their team, right? Get your team in a room and say, what are your biggest challenges? What are your biggest time sucks? And what are your hardest problems to solve? And then going back and reflecting, can AI help us with any of those things, right?
So my ask for leaders are to propagate down to everyone a bit of curiosity and a bit of self-reflection on because we get so used to doing the same task over and over and over and over. Um, and you have to actually step outside of that to say, could this task be done? Let me just give you another really quick example of something that just popped up yesterday that was just because I was just purely curious. So I had a transcript. Sorry, I had an audio recording that I wanted to get turned into a transcript. And normally I would just use a tool that was available and whatever. I would say most of the time speaker detection is terrible, especially breaking it into those sections. And what I thought was interesting is I know that some of the latest models that just came out, for example, with Google, are exceptionally fast and exceptionally good at ripping through audio and video for pulling out transcripts. But I was wondering if it could do speaker detection. And then I was like, well, how does it know who I am? So all I did literally a 5 second recording of myself saying, hey, this is me. And I included that in my reference material along with the recording that I had. And basically, it picked me out versus the other dude that I was talking to. And again, that was just one of those that's like normally I would have used another tool that I had. And and in terms of again things that we as leaders need to ask ourselves as everything's changing is, we have this interesting swivel chair problem of all these tools. We have our transcription tools, we have our, chat tools, we have our in document tools, we have like all these different tools. And it's like, can I collapse some of these? Or do I still need the Grammarly that I used starting 3 years ago? Like, is that still a thing that I need to use? Not to pick them out, but that
Yeah,
was just the one that popped into my head.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and again, this was just a really weird case where it was a question in my head of like, can it tell who I am versus the other dude? And it did. And I was like,
Wow.
holy crap! Like this was not something I'd ever read anywhere or done anything. And again, I only present these in this context to just give you that it could just be anything, like any of the tasks that you have in really weird ways that you just need to continue to try. And again, that's the piece of advice I would give is just again that introspection of and that little bit of curiosity on every single task to just ask like, is this a thing that I could possibly do? Even if it seems bizarre that you would do it, just give it a try, especially with the multimodal capabilities of these things now. I was just reading some articles yesterday about the how we basically went from 75% to effectively done when it comes to OCR nowadays with these things. So everyone was using Expensify for stuff, but you can just literally take a picture and give it to the machine now and extract it in exactly the same way. And again, I'm
Right.
not suggesting you stop using your Expensify account because there's other values there, but again,
Yeah.
if you're a small business or something and that was part of your workflow, and if that's a cost you can save because you're already using a lot of other tools, then potentially it's a thing you could do. And again, it's a thing that I would have never thought about had I just not been in that mindset.
Right. And for the leaders that are in the mindset that like know that AI is here and that AI is a thing and it's a tool and it's a machine and it's very overwhelming. Like you said, there's so many different tools and choices. And I was even talking to someone the other day and they were like, well, now this new DeepSeek thing is out here. Where does that put ChatGPT? And I said, hey, don't like stop worrying about it. More is going to come our way, right? Find your path, get started, get on a platform, get with your team. I said, give them the gift of increased productivity and deeper thinking.
Yes.
And the good news is, a lot of these tools are not that expensive. It's relatively very, very small amounts of money to spend on increasing productivity and arming the important people and all the people at your company with tools to dig through it and work faster and be creative and say, should I and how can I be doing this differently?
Point.
And for leaders, they don't need to feel overwhelmed, right? It's not going to be a huge tech integration. They don't need if they don't want to or don't have the capabilities to build this stuff themselves?
So that's a very interesting point. I would like to deep dive on that for 1 second. Double click as I was talking with somebody who kept saying that. I would like to double click in on that.
Okay.
So let's double click on that one. So what's interesting is when you look at enterprise AI,
Hmm.
the number one thing that, especially being somebody who's both worked on in enterprises and one who has built products for enterprises, is it's just always about integration. It's like it's got to be integrated. Like it's got to use my documents. It's got to be integrated with my store, my this, my that, and my everything. And those are always big tasks. And I want to emphasize that you do not need to wait for that integration to happen. There is value that you can derive from these tools in a vacuum. Just simply, I mentioned this last time and I'll continue to mention this, by just simply creating personas of the skills of people who you're interacting with to allow you and to afford you the opportunity in a safe space for yourself to interact with those personalities such that you're more comfortable when you then go talk to them. You can do that in absence of any other information. You don't need to be integrated with your anything in order to just gain that. That's about you.
Yeah, and I think because AI and platforms like Charm are so, they are intuitive and they are specialized and customized, you don't need to hire a team of people to come and do the integration because there is none, or even the training, right? When I worked at Yahoo for 20 years, we would roll out different tools like Salesforce and other awesome tools, but it required huge teams of consultants to come in and do integrations, huge teams of training people to come in and train. And with the AI platforms that I use and am exposed to, that's no longer necessary. That the system also helps train its user, which is so great. And you can create, training specialists or superstar users that share. And the platform does make it really easy to share. So if I create a custom charm that I think is incredible or a good persona of a customer, I can share that with our tech guy. I can share that with our product marketing people. I can share that persona across the platform, which makes it so much easier.
We have definitely seen that benefit all over the place is sharing these different, not only the skills, but roles, methodologies. It's a really interesting time, and now that you're talking about it the way that you are, it's really interesting that it's that kind of a share. Like you wouldn't think you could share a personality, for example, and those are things that are, I don't want to call them commodities now, but like you can trade in personalities, and that's a fascinating thing to think about.
Mhm.
So I know we focus on that quite a bit, and I'll just drive that home. And I know we're talking about business leaders and other things here, but again, don't forget that the people is the core nugget here. That the focus is like how do we empower this in and provide safe spaces and the skills and all these things for the employees so that they're comfortable doing this thing.
Yes, it is, especially for leaders today. We did try to focus on leadership today, but it can be anything. Whether you're a leader of a Fortune 500 or a small company or an entrepreneur, you're a one-man show or a five-person show. I think that the clear core messages I hope that came across today were like empowering people, empowering leaders. Don't get paralyzed and overwhelmed by the hype and the complexity surrounding AI. Instead, really, start with the foundations and take proactive steps to develop those understandings within yourself and within your team, and know that there's tools out there, amazing tools, like highly customized. Rob, this has been incredibly insightful and demystifying and practical. A very useful conversation as always. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for breaking down what are very complex concepts and making AI and an AI strategy feel less abstract and more actionable, not only for leaders, but for everyone, right? This conversation really did evolve into that. But for leaders listening, these are great conversations to have with your teams and empowering them to not feel overwhelmed and take a breath and think about the things that they all know, goals, needs, and challenges, and how AI tools can help alleviate that, make them better, make them stronger, make them faster. And for all of you tuning in today, I sincerely hope this discussion provides you with a much clearer, grounded path forward as you continue to navigate in this very rapidly evolving world. We'll be sure to include direct links to Charm IQ as well as previous videos and podcasts. We hope to see you next week, and we'll see where this conversation takes us. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.